Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am excited to do this video today because I didn't think it would actually happen. So today we're going to talk about what I read in the month of October. And honestly, halfway through the month, if you watched any of my other videos, you know that I had barely read anything. I hadn't finished anything, but somehow in the last few days I scraped together a couple of short books, a couple audiobooks, and finished them up. So I will be talking about 4 books today. So that means in the month of October I finished 4 books, and that was 851 pages. 1 of those was a physical book, and 3 of them were audiobooks. Sorry, no, 2 of them were physical and 2 were audiobooks, which means I need to find my other book. Okay, I'm back, and I could not find my other book anywhere, so I'll have to just put a picture up on the screen for that. Today I'm drinking my dandelion chai, and it's actually really good with a little bit of milk in it. I love it. Okay, so into what I read last month. Anyone else just run up the stairs and get really out of breath? Should not be this out of breath. Alright, the first book that I finished last month was Heart and Habits: How We Change for Good, and this is by Greg Gifford. He is a professor of biblical counseling at the Master's University, and this was the book of the month at our church a couple of months ago. It took me a while to get through. So the first half is laying down a lot of foundation for why we change and kind of refuting the non-Christian view of habits and how we can make ourselves change and how it's not really a part of the heart. It's just a change that we do on the outside, and most books aren't going to address what is happening in the heart from a Christian perspective. So he spends a lot of the book going over that, and in my opinion it got a little boring, I guess, and I was ready to get into the practical part of it, but it was still important, especially if you've been exposed to the worldly view of habits and don't understand how the heart connects to that. He does a great job of laying out what the heart is, why we want to change, what our motivation is as believers. So this is definitely a very Christian book, which is really good. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. Like I said, it took me a long time to get through it, I felt like, but once you get past halfway, that's when I really liked it, and I see applications for the whole book in counseling, and I've used some of it in counseling, but when you get to the second half, he gets really practical. And he tells you, okay, how can you change while keeping in mind the spiritual motivation? He has this really great graphic of the different spheres of our life and how we have to work from the inner sphere out. So you can see it. We start with spiritual in the middle, where our heart is, and then we go out to the personal sphere, the familial sphere, vocational, and social. And so if we're trying to make better habits in our life, we need to start with the spiritual sphere because that's going to affect everything else in our life. And he refers back to that a lot throughout the book. So that was a really helpful way to just define habits and show you the reason why we want to change and how we can change. Oh, I really love his inventory of habits, and he goes through, he has sinful habits and all these questions. Do you have thoughts about God that are blasphemous? Do you skip church regularly? Do you not give sacrificially? All these things. And then questions for the personal, questions for familial, vocational, social, and then he has categories for each one. So these are sinful habits, these are unhelpful, these are sanctifying, and these are helpful. So a good way to just examine your heart in all of these different spheres and see where you're at. Where do you really need to work on habits? And then chapter 13 is applying the truth about habits, and he has very practical steps. And he goes through and has a personal growth worksheet helping you to write out, okay, this is the habit I want to develop. My goal is to please God by, and then secondarily, my habit will do good to people by. So he talks about the fact that habits are not for yourself, which that's a very eye-opening thing. Habits are not for yourself and your own good. They're for God first, to glorify him, and then they're for other people, how our lives affect other people, and then they help us. So then he has the sphere of life. Okay, this habit that you're trying to form, what sphere does it go in? Then the steps of habit development. Okay, are you prioritizing this? Say you really want to fix a habit in the social sphere. Well, before you can even get to that, you need to work on the spiritual then move up just to make sure that you're prioritizing the right things. Then he talks about frequency of habits, community, how the people around you can help in the way that you shape your habits, your environment. Oh, what I really loved about this book was, this was probably my favorite chapter in here, which is actually the appendix. So it's called More Education or New Habits, and he is a college professor. So he said a lot of the questions he get is, what is more beneficial about higher education? Learning a body of knowledge or developing habits of discipline, timeliness, project management, communication, sustained focus, and so forth? Are you paying primarily for a body of knowledge or for a skill set? And that was so helpful to me, talking about how higher education is not just about the knowledge that you're learning, because right now I am in some college classes that are really not that interesting to me, and I'm really ready to get done. But it gave me a lot of encouragement, thinking, okay, what I'm doing right now is helping me set up habits for the rest of my life, because it's not like I'm ever going to be less busy necessarily. I'll just be busy with other things. So if right now I can't make time to spend time with friends and to get to know people in the church, then why would I have time for that whenever I have kids or whatever's next down the road? So that was just really eye-opening to me, thinking about the fact that everyone should have some type of higher education, whether it's actually going to college or just taking some online courses or whatever it is you're doing, always learning something and always having something to be disciplined in, and that helps you a lot with that time management. So I would recommend that you read this book, especially if you are struggling with having good habits, going to church, reading your Bible, spending time with your family. He talks a lot about the God of, what did he call it? It's the God of EP, like effectiveness or efficiency / productivity, and how that's usually our motivation for forming good habits is, can we be more productive? But he talks about how that shouldn't be our main focus in habits. I will definitely be using that book a lot in counseling. And then the next book that I read last month was an audiobook, Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie. I do like to throw an Agatha Christie in every once in a while, just because I do like a good mystery book, and hers are much better than a modern mystery book most of the time. If you watched, I think, my video from September, I finished an Agatha Christie book that I really loved, that one. So go check out that video to see my review. But this one I only ended up giving 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. I think, let's see. Yeah, someone I follow had given it a good review and talked about how they enjoyed it. So I needed something to listen to real fast. So I just grabbed this one and listened to it. And it wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't my favorite Agatha Christie. I don't necessarily like animals, so I feel like the inclusion of the animal part was a little bit odd, but it was still enjoyable. It was, I guess, slightly more predictable than a usual Agatha Christie, but once you get to read more and more, you kind of see where she's going in a lot of the books. There was, if you're looking for like a Holmes-Watson relationship, that definitely was present in this book, which I thought was cool. You have Poirot, who's like the really smart one, and then the other guy, I don't remember his name, which the story was actually told from his point of view, not from Poirot's point of view. And so he's kind of trying to figure things out and seeing what he's noticing, and then eventually he starts to put the pieces together. So I thought that was cool. Then the third book that I read was Forgiven to be Forgiving, and this is one that I can't find. It is a little booklet that was actually written by one of the elders in our church, our elder over biblical counseling. And so he took a lot of information from different counseling books about forgiveness and wrote this little booklet. It's only like 50 pages, just going over what is our motivation for forgiveness, what have we been forgiven of, how do we forgive, what are those promises of forgiveness. It's not just moving on, it's okay, and also talking about the wrong things that we say whenever we're repenting or forgiving someone. We say, oh, I'm sorry, or we say, it's okay, instead of actually using biblical terms. He also goes over confession and confronting others on their sin. So this was very useful. I went over it in counseling, and I gave it 5 stars, which it has 100% 5-star ratings on Goodreads. And I thought it was just a really useful book, especially if you're dealing with forgiveness or counseling someone else on forgiveness. This would be a great resource to use. And then lastly, I read the Emily of the New Moon series. I think someone from our church read it, but I have 15 friends and followers who have given this a rating. A lot of people gave it 5 stars. I so far don't like her better than Anne. I also haven't read Anne of Green Gables in a while. This is by Ellen Montgomery, if you don't know, the same author as Anne of Green Gables. And obviously there's just something special about Anne of Green Gables. It is the classic that Montgomery is known for, and everyone really relates to her story. And I've said in other videos, I really like Anne and feel like I can relate to her. Emily was a lot different. She starts out at 11 in this book, and I just started the second book, and she's only 14 by that book. But it was still enjoyable, and obviously reading classic books, like I've said, there's always some kind of moral that you can see in there. They actually talk about sin, and it's just interesting to see the little like small town family gossip that goes around, and interesting to listen to, and to see her growing up and standing up for her own values and ideas whenever her aunts who are raising her are very opposed to like everything that Emily does. So seeing that relationship, and yes, she's disrespectful a lot of times, but she has to learn and grow through that, and I think we can also learn from reading her story. I gave it 3 stars, and by the end I did really like her character and like seeing her grow up, and I did start the second book because I want to see where the story is going. Especially there's a lot of potential like future love interest. Even though she's only 12, she obviously doesn't see it, but as a reader seeing the story, you can see that there's a lot of possibilities going on, and so I'm really curious to see where that goes, because you start rooting for the person that you really like, and you're like, what is the author going to do here? So anyways, I'm on the second book right now, and I will let you know how this series goes. A lot of people that I trust, like Miriam and I think Chantel, they really like this book. So I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was a bit shorter for my monthly recap. Hopefully next month will be better, as I will have Thanksgiving break and all that. And I'm going to finish Lord of the Rings this month, so I will get to the stack that has been here since July. So why don't you leave me 2 comments below. 1, what was your favorite book that you read in October? And number 2, what book should I read when I finish Lord of the Rings? Either I have Behind the Act, was sent to me for free by a author I just saw on Instagram, or Once I Knew by Victoria Lynn, another author that I found on Instagram. So which one would you like me to read next, if you know anything about it? I hope you are keeping up with me on Instagram, and I will see you back here next week. Bye.